Thousands gathered in Washington, D.C. for a rally billed Remove the Regime, a high-energy protest demanding the impeachment, conviction, and removal of President Donald Trump.
Washington Democrats made up their minds to impeach President Trump before he was even inaugurated.
Donald Trump is a living, breathing, impeachable offense.
Donald Trump is facing an impeachment trial again. No president has ever been impeached twice, and no president has ever gone on trial after leaving office. It's fair to say we're in pretty uncharted territory. So what's the case against him? Donald Trump is accused of inciting violence against the government. Specifically this, the storming of Congress by thousands of his supporters. But his accusers say you have to go back a couple of months to last November's presidential election.
We know there was massive fraud.
That was a rigged election.
If you count the legal votes, I easily win.
Trump lost, but refused to admit it. Not only that, but when the state of Georgia was getting ready to hold a second round of voting to settle two very close Senate races, Mr. Trump is accused of trying to intervene.
All right. So I need to tell you about something that's been building quietly in Washington, something that the mainstream media has been mostly ignoring, but something that could absolutely explode at any moment and change everything about Trump's second term. There is a live impeachment resolution sitting in Congress right now, not from his first term, not some old historical document, a brand new impeachment resolution filed in 2025 during his current presidency with 7 separate articles laying out alleged crimes and constitutional violations. And here's what makes this moment so different from the first 2 impeachments. The Senate, the same body that saved Trump twice before, has already started breaking with him on major votes. Republicans are crossing him. The firewall that protected him is showing cracks. And the scandals keep piling up in ways that make the political calculation more dangerous for him every single day. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
Crowds filled the National Mall, carrying signs, banners, and costumes, turning the Capitol into a stage of political dissent. The demonstration was organized by the Grassroots Removal Coalition, drawing supporters from across the country. This wasn't just another protest. Speakers insisted it represented a broader national frustration with the administration. Former Washington Metro Police Officer Michael Fanone took the stage, telling protesters he showed up because the country is worth fighting for.
Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, come on, we've been through this before. Trump got impeached twice and nothing happened. The Senate acquitted him both times. His base stayed loyal. He came back and won another election. Why would this time be any different? And look, I hear you. That's a fair question. But here's what's changed. Here's what's different about where we are right now. During his first term, Trump had the Republican Party completely locked down. Senate Republicans were terrified to cross him. They voted in lockstep to protect him no matter what. But now in his second term, we're seeing something we didn't see before. We're seeing cracks in that unity. We're seeing Republican senators willing to defy him on major votes. Just recently, the Senate voted 60-40 to advance a spending measure that Trump's own allies were fighting against. That's significant. That tells you that when the political pressure gets high enough, at least some Republicans are willing to put distance between themselves and the president. And that changes the impeachment math in ways that matter. Because impeachment isn't just about the evidence. It's not just about whether a president actually did something wrong. It's about politics. It's about whether enough members of the opposing party and enough members of the president's own party decide that the political cost of protecting him is higher than the political cost of cutting him loose. And right now, with Trump's approval numbers fluctuating, with scandal after scandal hitting the news, with the retribution campaign making even some Republicans uncomfortable, that calculation is shifting. Not dramatically, not overnight, but it's shifting. And if one more big scandal hits, if something truly explosive drops, the groundwork for impeachment is already there, waiting to be activated. Let's talk about that impeachment resolution for a second, because most people don't even know it exists. House Resolution 353 was introduced in April 2025. It lays out 7 separate articles of impeachment against Donald Trump. We're talking about obstruction of justice. We're talking about abuse of power. We're talking about bribery. We're talking about violations of the Constitution that the authors argue are so serious that they warrant removal from office. Now, has this resolution advanced? No, it's sitting in committee. The Republican majority isn't going to bring it to the floor. But here's the thing, it's still live. It's still there. It's still on the books. And if circumstances change, if Democrats take back the House, if public opinion shifts dramatically, if some Republicans decide they've had enough, that resolution can be dusted off and move forward at any time. And while that resolution sits there waiting, the evidence pile keeps growing. Reuters just published a major investigation into what they're calling Trump's retribution campaign. According to their reporting, at least 470 people or entities have been targeted by the Trump administration through firings, through investigations, through punitive actions, all connected to Trump's stated goal of getting revenge on his political enemies. 470 targets. That's not normal presidential behavior. That's not how the government is supposed to work. That's using the power of the federal government as a weapon against people the president doesn't like. And that kind of behavior, that pattern of abuse, that's exactly what impeachment was designed to address. Then you've got the Epstein file situation hanging over everything like a dark cloud. Trump signed a bill ordering the Justice Department to release all the Epstein-related documents. And now Democrats are watching like hawks to see if the release is full and complete, or if it's selective and delayed in ways that protect certain people. If there's any appearance that Trump is slow walking or manipulating the release of those files, if there's any hint that he's using his power to cover up embarrassing or incriminating information, that becomes another article in the impeachment case. That becomes more evidence of obstruction and abuse of power. The stakes around those files are enormous, and Trump knows it. Everyone in Washington knows it. So here's what we're going to do in this video. We're going to break down exactly what's in that impeachment resolution. We're going to look at the retribution campaign and what it tells us about how Trump is governing. We're going to examine the Epstein file situation and why it could be a political landmine. And we're going to talk about whether the Senate firewall that saved Trump twice before is really as strong as it used to be, because the political landscape is shifting, the pressure is building, and the question isn't really whether impeachment could happen, it's whether the circumstances will come together to make it happen. Stay with me. Okay, so let's really dig into what's actually happening here, because there's a lot more going on beneath the surface than most people realize. Let's start with House Resolution 353, the impeachment resolution that's currently sitting in Congress. This thing was introduced back in April 2025, just a few months into Trump's second term, and it lays out a comprehensive case for why the authors believe Trump should be removed from office. We're not talking about vague complaints or political posturing here. We're talking about 7 distinct articles, each one alleging specific constitutional violations or criminal behavior. Article 1 deals with obstruction of justice. Article 2 covers abuse of power. There are articles addressing bribery, emoluminance violations, conduct unbecoming of a president. It's a detailed document that reads like a legal brief, laying out a prosecutorial case. Now, who filed this resolution? Democratic members of the House, who have been vocal critics of Trump since before he even took office the second time. And yes, you can argue that they're politically motivated. You can argue that they would have filed impeachment articles no matter what Trump did. But here's the thing. The specific allegations in this resolution aren't invented out of thin air. They're based on documented actions that the Trump administration has actually taken. They cite specific executive orders. They reference specific policy decisions. They point to specific statements Trump has made. Whether you agree with the interpretation or not, the factual basis for the allegations is grounded in things that actually happened, and that matters. Because it means this isn't just political theater, it's a legal document making a legal argument based on a factual record. The resolution hasn't advanced, and realistically, it won't advance as long as Republicans control the House. Speaker Johnson has zero interest in bringing impeachment to the floor. The Republican majority isn't going to vote to impeach their own president. That's just basic political reality. But, and this is important, the resolution is still alive, procedurally. It hasn't been killed. It hasn't been withdrawn. It's sitting there in committee, waiting. And in politics, having something ready to go can matter a lot when circumstances suddenly change. If there's a major scandal, if public opinion shifts dramatically, if some catalyzing event makes impeachment politically viable, that resolution can be moved forward quickly. The groundwork has already been done. Now let's talk about the retribution campaign, because this is really the heart of why impeachment talk is gaining momentum again. Reuters published an absolutely devastating investigation documenting how Trump has turned revenge against his political enemies into an actual governing strategy. They identified at least 470 people or entities who have been targeted by the administration through various punitive actions. We're talking about government employees who were fired or reassigned because they were perceived as disloyal. We're talking about private companies that face regulatory pressure after criticizing the administration. We're talking about individuals who found themselves under investigation or audit after speaking out against Trump. We're talking about a systematic effort to use the machinery of the federal government as a tool for political retaliation. This is extraordinary. And I don't mean that in a good way. Presidents have always had political opponents. Presidents have always been frustrated by critics and leakers and people who don't fall in line. But what's happening now goes way beyond normal political hardball. This is the weaponization of government power for personal vendettas. This is using the FBI, using the IRS, using regulatory agencies, using the full force of the executive branch to punish people who Trump doesn't like. And that's not just bad governance, that's potentially criminal. That's potentially impeachable. Because when you use public power for private revenge, when you treat the government as your personal enforcement arm against enemies, you're violating your oath of office. You're abusing the trust that the American people placed in you. You're doing exactly what the founders worried about when they created the impeachment mechanism. The articles in House Resolution 353 specifically cite abuse of power as one of the grounds for impeachment, and the Reuters investigation provides a detailed factual basis for that charge. 470 documented targets. That's not a coincidence. That's not a few isolated incidents. That's a pattern. That's a policy. That's a deliberate, systematic effort to use presidential power in ways that benefit Trump personally rather than serving the public interest. And every week, new examples emerge, new firings, new investigations, new punitive actions against people who crossed Trump. At some point, the evidence file keeps growing. Then there's the Epstein file situation, which is this whole other pressure point that could blow up at any moment. So here's the background. For years, there's been intense public interest in finding out more about Jeffrey Epstein's connections to powerful people. Trump knew Epstein. They were photographed together. They moved in similar social circles. And there have been persistent questions about the nature of their relationship that have never been fully answered. Earlier this term, Trump signed a bill ordering the Justice Department to release all Epstein-related files. Sounds like transparency, right? Sounds like Trump has nothing to hide, right? But here's where it gets complicated. Democrats in Congress are now watching very carefully to see how this release actually happens. They're looking for any signs that the release is being slow-walked. They're looking for any evidence that documents are being withheld or redacted in ways that protect certain people. They're looking for any indication that Trump or his administration is manipulating the process to control what comes out and what stays buried. And they've made clear that if they see anything suspicious, if there's any appearance of obstruction or selective disclosure, they will use every oversight tool at their disposal to force full transparency. That could mean subpoenas. That could mean contempt proceedings. That could mean adding obstruction charges to the impeachment case. The Epstein files are politically radioactive for a lot of powerful people, not just Trump, but Trump is the one sitting in the Oval Office. Trump is the one who controls the Justice Department. Trump is the one who will be held responsible if the release appears compromised in any way. And given everything else that's happening, given the retribution campaign, given the existing impeachment resolution, any appearance of a cover-up around the Epstein files would be devastating. It would validate every accusation about Trump using his power for personal protection. It would give Democrats a clear, compelling narrative about obstruction and abuse. It would potentially flip some Republican senators who might otherwise protect him. And speaking of Republican senators, let's talk about why the firewall that saved Trump twice before might not be as strong this time. During both previous impeachments, Senate Republicans voted almost unanimously to acquit. The handful who voted to convict, like Mitt Romney, were treated as traitors and outcasts. The message was clear: cross Trump and your political career is over. But something interesting has happened in the second term. Republicans have started crossing Trump on certain votes and surviving. The 60-40 vote on the spending measure is a perfect example. 20 Republicans joined Democrats to advance that bill over the objections of Trump's strongest allies. They did it. They survived. The sky didn't fall. That matters psychologically. It shows Republican senators that defying Trump is possible, that it doesn't automatically end your career, that there are circumstances where putting distance between yourself and the president is actually the smart political move. Now, does that mean 20 Republicans would vote to convict Trump in an impeachment trial? Probably not. Not yet. But it does mean the absolute unity that protected him before has been broken. It does mean there's a precedent for crossing him when the pressure is high enough. And if scandals keep piling up, if public opinion turns against Trump more dramatically, if the political cost of protecting him becomes higher than the political cost of abandoning him, those cracks could widen into something much more significant. All right, let's break this down. into the key points you need to understand about where things actually stand right now. Point number 1, there is a real live impeachment resolution against Trump currently sitting in Congress. House Resolution 353 was filed in April 2025 with 7 separate articles alleging obstruction of justice, abuse of power, bribery, and other constitutional violations. This isn't ancient history from his first term. This is a document filed during his current presidency based on actions taken during his current administration. Now, it hasn't advanced and probably won't advance while Republicans control the House, but it exists, it's on the record, and it could be activated quickly if circumstances change. Point number 2, the retribution campaign, documented by Reuters, provides substantial factual support for the abuse of power allegations. At least 470 people or entities have been targeted by the Trump administration through firings, investigations, regulatory actions, and other punitive measures connected to political revenge. This isn't speculation or partisan spin. This is documented in detail by one of the most respected news organizations in the world. And this kind of systematic use of government power for personal vendettas is exactly what the abuse of power article in the impeachment resolution is talking about. Every new target, every new firing, every new investigation launched against a Trump critic adds to the evidence pile. Point number 3, the Epstein files represent a ticking time bomb that could explode at any moment. Trump signed a bill requiring release of the files, but now everyone is watching to see if that release is full and transparent or selective and manipulated. Democrats have made clear they will treat any appearance of obstruction as grounds for aggressive oversight and potentially additional impeachment charges. If documents appear to be withheld or redacted in ways that protect Trump or his associates, that becomes a major scandal on top of all the existing scandals. The political risk around those files is enormous. Point number 4, the Senate firewall that saved Trump twice before is showing cracks for the first time. The 60-40 vote on the spending measure demonstrated that Republicans are willing to cross Trump when political circumstances demand it. 20 Republican senators voted against Trump's position on that bill, and their careers didn't end. That precedent matters. It shows that absolute lockstep unity with Trump is no longer mandatory for Republican survival. And while that doesn't mean 20 Republicans would vote to convict in an impeachment trial today, it does mean the calculation could change if pressure intensifies. Point number 5, the political environment is fundamentally different from the first 2 impeachments in ways that matter. During those earlier episodes, Trump was either a first-term president with the argument that voters should decide his fate, or an outgoing president where removal seemed pointless. Now he's a second-term president who can't run again. The political incentives are different. Republicans don't need to protect him to win the next presidential election because he's not going to be the nominee. They need to think about their own futures, their own re-election campaigns, their own legacies. And if Trump becomes toxic enough, if he drags down the party badly enough, some Republicans might decide that cutting him loose is actually the smart long-term play. Point number 6, the groundwork for impeachment is being laid, even if the word itself is being avoided by party leadership. Democratic leaders have been cautious about embracing impeachment openly, worried about the political backlash and accusations of overreach. But behind the scenes, the infrastructure is being built. Oversight investigations are ongoing. Document requests are being filed. Witnesses are being interviewed. Evidence is being compiled. And the impeachment resolution sits there ready to go. If something major breaks, if a smoking gun emerges, if public opinion shifts dramatically, the machinery to move forward already exists. It wouldn't require starting from scratch. Point number 7, impeachment serves a purpose even if removal never happens. This is something a lot of people don't fully appreciate. The first 2 impeachments didn't result in conviction and removal, but they weren't meaningless. They created a permanent historical record. They forced senators to go on record defending specific behaviors. They shaped public perception and media coverage. They established precedents about what conduct is and isn't acceptable. A third impeachment, even one that also failed to result in conviction, would add to that record. It would force another vote. It would create another moment of accountability. And it would further cement the narrative that Trump's presidency was defined by scandal and constitutional crisis. Point number 8, the next few months are critical for determining whether impeachment moves from theoretical to actual. Several things could shift the political calculus rapidly. The Epstein files release could contain explosive revelations that change everything. The retribution campaign could target someone high profile enough to generate massive backlash. A court ruling could force the administration into contempt proceedings that escalate into constitutional crisis. The midterm elections could flip the House back to Democrats who would be eager to impeach. Any number of scenarios could transform impeachment from background noise into front-page emergency. And here's the bottom line that ties all of this together. Impeachment isn't unstoppable today. That would be an exaggeration. Republicans still control the House, and they're not going to vote to impeach their own president unless something truly catastrophic happens. But impeachment also isn't impossible the way it might have seemed a year ago. The resolution exists, the evidence is piling up, the Senate firewall is cracking, the political dynamics are shifting, and the scandals keep coming week after week without any sign of slowing down. At some point, if the pressure keeps building, if the circumstances align, impeachment becomes not just possible, but potentially inevitable. Trump has survived 2 impeachments already. He might survive a 3rd, but each one takes a toll. Each one damages his historical legacy. Each one forces his defenders into increasingly uncomfortable positions. Each one makes it harder for serious people to pretend that his presidency is normal or acceptable. And each one moves the country closer to a reckoning with fundamental questions about presidential power, accountability, and the rule of law that we've been avoiding for too long. The question isn't really whether Trump deserves to be impeached. People will disagree about that forever based on their political priors. The question is whether the political circumstances will ever align in a way that makes impeachment happen. And right now, with the resolution filed, with the evidence accumulating, with the Senate showing cracks, with the scandals multiplying, we're closer to that alignment than we've been at any point in his 2nd term. Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. But the possibility is real in a way that shouldn't be dismissed. All right, that's going to wrap things up for today. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications because this situation is developing rapidly. Every week brings new developments in the various scandals, new revelations about the retribution campaign, new pressure points around the Epstein files, new votes that test Republican unity. We're going to be following all of it as it unfolds. The impeachment watch continues. I'll see you in the next one.